Hello, everyone. Vic here with another video. Today, I'm talking about the all-time top 10 horror villains. So many horror villains in the history of horror movies. So many that could make this list. I'm gonna narrow it down to 10. Now, I want to preface a lot of horror villains are not going to make this list. So I'm gonna do a second list later on that has some of the more B-level, B movie, lesser franchise horror villains. So I'm gonna do a specific list for them. But today we're doing the top 10. So a lot of them gotta go. They can't make this top list. I'm gonna start today with some honorable mentions. The first honorable mention is going to be Death from the Final Destination series. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, is that actually a character? Yes, it is. It is a character. It doesn't have a face. It doesn't have a shape. It doesn't have a consistent thread per se. Even the way Death acts is different in each sequel. There's new rules for the character in each sequel, so it's hard to pinpoint what the Death character is in Final Destination. But I want to give a shout out because it's such a unique villain. In all of horror, usually you have an actual human shaped killer you can clearly identify. Death is something in the shadows. It's a complete mystery. But the Final Destination series is one of my favorite series. So I want to give a shout out to Death and the honorable mentions list and say that, hey, we appreciate what you do, Death. We appreciate Death's plan. We appreciate the idea that maybe Tony Todd is Death. We don't know. Maybe we'll get some more information in this new sequel, but I'm going to go ahead and put that as an honorable mention. My next honorable mention actually is going to be the Creeper from the Jeepers Creepers series. Now, I'm somebody who loves the first Jeepers Creepers. Actually, let me correct that. I love the first half of the original Jeepers Creepers film. That first 30 minutes specifically with all the suspense, the mysterious truck, the following of Derry and his sister. I love the first 30, 40 minutes. Once you get to like the nighttime of the movie and once the creeper reveals itself, a lot of the mystery and suspense, a lot of the cool stuff about the movie goes away. But Creeper as a villain, well, in the first movie, still pretty fantastic. He actually wins, so there's no taking him down the first one. It's the sequels where the Creeper kind of goes off the rails for me, specifically not even part two, part three, where the Creeper becomes Batman. He has all the gadgets, so many things, and this is a prequel, so you'd think he would show these things in the first one, but we see them all in part three. The most laughable thing ever is the Creeper standing on his van, his truck, while the truck moves backwards. I mean, turning him into Batman was quite the choice. The sequels have been so bad in the Jeepers Creepers series that the Creeper cannot make the top 10 list. If he had better sequels and if they had been consistent with him from the first movie, he could have made the list, but it's not going to do it here. In fact, you know what? Take the damn Creeper off my honorable mentions. I'm mad I mentioned him, all right? Replace him with the stepfather, uh, Terry Quinn from the stepfather, from just Stepfather and Stepfather 2, leaves a much better impression, is a much better villain than the Creeper. So we're throwing the Creeper out of the honorable mentions. We're putting in the stepfather character from Stepfather, Stepfather 2. If you haven't seen the Stepfather movies, I would recommend doing a binge watch. Hopefully they're on Tubi. Watch those movies. All right, now with the actual top 10 list. This is going to be controversial for number 10 because I just said earlier that I'm saving the B movie villains for a different list, but that means I consider this one to be an A movie villain. And number 10 is the Leprechaun. You should never take a Leprechaun's gold, and you should never leave him off your top 10 list. I'm just going to say it right now. The Leprechaun is one of my favorite horror villain characters. He's not even a bad guy. He's even a villain. I mean, if you don't take his gold, you can hang out with him, you can smoke weed with him, you can have a drink with him. He seems like a rather down to earth, cool, chill leprechaun, unless you take his gold. Listen, this is all about Warwick Davis. Warwick Davis is an amazing actor. He infuses Leprechaun with such a sense of humor, so many great facial expressions, so many laughs. Um, I just love Warwick Davis' performance as Leprechaun. I think the movies, I'm not going to sit there and say that they're great movies. I'm not going to say they're it should be in a museum of horror films to be displayed. Absolutely not. They're mostly garbage, but they are fun. March, St. Patrick's Day is coming up, and I will be marathoning all the Leprechaun movies with a specific nod to Leprechaun 3 in Las Vegas, the best in the series. Leprechaun makes my list. He may not make anybody else's list, but I'm giving the little green fella the props he deserves. Number 9. Well, 2024 was a year, a lot of good things in the horror community, but one of the bad things about last year in the horror community was the loss of Tony Todd, one of horror's greatest iconic horror actors, unfortunately passed away. And I want to give him the ultimate shout out here and say that Candyman is my number 9. Now, Candyman, the original movie, is fantastic. It almost had Sandra Bullock as the main female lead. And if you believe rumors to be true, Potentially, Eddie Murphy was up for the role of Candyman. Now, I don't know if I believe that. It doesn't quite make sense that Eddie Murphy would ever be up for the role of Candyman, but we did see him in Vampire in Brooklyn, so maybe he was standing around, read the script, and said, "You should never sit on Candyman's coffin." It's a terrible Vampire in Brooklyn accent. Vampire in Brooklyn also underrated movie, fun movie like the Leprechaun series. Candyman, the original, is a great, great horror movie. A lot of lore, a lot of suspenseful scenes, great performances, and a lot of cultural messages. And but it doesn't beat you over the head with the deeper stuff, but you can kind of pick up on it as the movie goes. Tony Todd famously was paid $100 for every sting bite, every bee sting in the movie because they use real bees. So he made quite a bit of money on Candyman. Why isn't Candyman higher on the list? Suffers the same thing as the Creeper did, where the Candyman sequels never lived up to the promise of the original Candyman. Now, in horror movies, there's plenty of horror series where the first one is so much better than the sequels. But what makes an iconic horror character usually at least having one sequel that people love. You think about the most iconic characters, there are sequels in those series that people love. Candyman, well, Candyman 2 is hot garbage, and Candyman 3 I haven't even seen because my partner in crime, Nick Arcana, tells me that nobody on planet Earth should watch Candyman 3, so I'm staying away. That's the only reason why Candyman can't be higher on the list. It's no disrespect to Tony Todd, who always gives a great performance in any movie I've seen him in. Tony Todd's been amazing. But Candyman, shitty sequels, and then the remake, the requel, pretty good, kind of a different thing, but no, I'm talking about Tony Todd's Candyman, number 9 here. Number 8, well, this may ruffle some feathers. I don't know. Is there a big Pinhead community? I feel like when you think about the biggest horror icon characters, I don't know if there's that much fandom for Pinhead as you would think. I think the image of Pinhead, when you see the white powdered face with the nails. It's like everybody kind of recognizes that as a horror villain. But I don't know if the Hellraiser movies are actually that celebrated or that huge in the pantheon of iconic horror stuff. Me personally, I haven't seen a lot of the Hellraiser movies, so it's hard for me to maybe give Pinhead the props it deserves. But mostly I want to put him on the list because I think that if you show everybody a picture of Pinhead, they know that that's a horror villain. They may even know the name Pinhead. It's just that the movies themselves, I don't think are held as high regard as some of the other horror franchises. But look, there's like what, damn near 15 Hellraiser movies. They did something right to get that many sequels. I know that maybe 7 or 8 of them are kind of like super bottom of the barrel, direct to video, direct to Tubi, direct to being unreleased, maybe even. But one of these days, I'm gonna binge watch the entire. Let me not say that. One of these days, I'm gonna binge watch at least the first couple Hellraiser movies, because I feel like you could easily take away my horror movie card if you realize that I haven't really seen the Hellraiser movies. Pinhead, though, is number 8 on the list. Let's go to number 7. This is a new addition. He wouldn't have been on list of years past, but the truth is, I was kind of late to the Terrifier party. Just in the last year, I saw all the Terrifier movies, part 1, part 2, part 3. And I have to say, after seeing all 3 Terrifier movies, Art the Clown definitely belongs on the list of the most iconic horror villains. It's so hard in today's culture to break through as a new iconic horror villain. You think about how fragmented entertainment is, period. So many things have so many different spaces, so many different fans, things are divided. People culturally don't really come together with like consensus opinions anymore, the same way it was like in the 80s or 90s. Things don't pop off as much. But I mean, I went to a Comic-Con with Nick Arcana last October. Nick Arcana is one of the biggest Terrifier fans, so he's always been beating that Terrifier drum. Um, Seeing the fan following for the actor who plays Art the Clown was amazing. He had by far the biggest line at the Comic-Con. And, watching the movies, Art the Clown is uniquely different from Freddy, Michael, Jason, from all your big horror icons, mainly because of just how brutal he is. I mean, sure, brutality, Art the Clown is number 1 with a bullet of all the horror icons. So just from a brutality standpoint, he stands out. The other thing is there's a lot of lore with the Terrifier series, a lot more lore than in most slasher movies, I would say. Now, is all the lore good? I mean, I'm not the biggest Terrifier fan, so I'm not gonna say that I'm sucked into the lore the way that some fans are. I'm more in a wait and see, get some answers about a lot of stuff that's so some of the questions that have been presented. I'm waiting to see some more answers on them, but the performance of Art the Clown, the fun the actor has playing him, the over the top crazy death scenes that Art the Clown exhibits. I have to definitely put him on the list here. Can he go higher than number 7 on the list? It's gonna be hard to break through into the top 6 because these are some big names that are coming up in this top 6. But Art the Clown he's off to the start that you would need to become a top 5 horror villain. Like I said, it's hard to get in that upper tier, but he's had the kind of start, and the Terrifier series keeps getting bigger and bigger. So as it grows, his value and his iconic nature is only going to grow as well. So I'm very curious to see how far Art the Clown can take this. Okay, number 6. Now, when you get in this top 6, it really becomes subjective. At this point, it really is like, okay, what is your favorite horror franchise? Which movies do you prefer? When did you grow up? What time period? Because some of these are newer, some of these are older, but there's a lot that can influence your decision here. So for me, number 6, and I'll be honest, he may seem low, but I probably thought about having him lower, and it's Leatherface. I've never been that high on Leatherface. I understand the iconic nature of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, how Toby Hooper did such a great job as a director and how that influenced things. But the rest of the franchise, in terms of the sequels, haven't had that much of an impact on me. I did actually really like the 2003 remake, which it's a Platinum Dunes remake, and I usually hate most of those, but that and the Friday 13th remake, those are the ones that I'm like, okay, those are probably my more favorite remakes from those guys. But yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leatherface. I don't know if it's aged as well. I don't know if today's generation really looks back on Leatherface with any kind of fondness. It feels like Leatherface might be more of a had to be there around that time to truly appreciate him. Maybe too many sequels, too many remakes, too many spin-offs have sort of lowered the value, and then some things have sort of taken the edge off that, like Wrong Turn feels like a version of Texas Chainsaw. X, Pearl, all that stuff seems like a version of Texas Chainsaw in a way. So there's been a lot of sort of spin-off type movies that weren't actually spin-offs, but felt like a variation of that maybe has lessened the impact of Leatherface himself. Um, Characteristics wise, personality wise, like I said, Leatherface, I understand his look is iconic. I understand that, especially in that first one, you get a great Leatherface performance. But I don't know, Leatherface just never really clicked with me. I never really think about Leatherface. I never really go back and think about rewatching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. So this is personally just subjective. If he's higher on the list, I get it completely. I respect him enough to have him in my top 10, but for me, I mean, I probably would watch Candyman before Texas Chainsaw again. Would I watch the Leprechaun movies before that? Probably not. So he's definitely ahead of Leprechaun. Okay, number 5. This top 5 list is very hard, but I'm gonna go with Ghostface for number 5. One of the things that holds Ghostface back is that what is Ghostface? It's just a human character, a different human being always with a mask on. So there's not one consistent Ghostface, but we can say that Ghostface under the costume has that same Roger Jackson voice. So you have the consistency of voice. He always looks the same. So physically, they always seem to cast a Ghostface that seems pretty physically similar. No matter who the human reveal is, once they put the mask on, they seem very similar to the Ghostface we all know and love. Um, Now, does the Ghostface costume give the person powers, physical powers? Me and Nick joke about this because the human characters who don the Ghostface mask suddenly have superhuman strength powers, can do a lot of do a lot of crazy physical things that who they actually are as a human shouldn't be able to do. I'm looking at you, Scream 5, in terms of who the killer was and what they would do physically. Scream 6, throwing that damn bodyguard. I don't know, but Ghostface is probably the most iconic modern horror icon. And what I mean by that is he got his start in 1996. The Scream sequels have mostly been all pretty good. And the Ghostface, the look, the costume, the voice of Roger Jackson's probably the biggest thing. Um, One of the creepiest things ever is that opening scene in the original Scream with Drew Barrymore and Ghostface. You get the voice, you get that super creepy opening shot when you first see Ghostface running across the hallway. That really creeped me the hell out. Um, so yeah, Ghostface has to be in my top 5. The Scream movies have made so much money, have had such a cultural impact. Ghostface, although not one set thing, it's you kinda know what to expect from Ghostface, so I gotta put him in the top 5. Number 4, this character has climbed up on my list. Probably 2 years ago, I actually might have put Ghostface over him, but I'm going with Chucky, and the thing with Chucky is you gotta appreciate his longevity. Chucky, I believe the first movie was 1988, so we're talking 37 years of Chucky, and the franchise has never really gone away. I mean, it has had periods where nothing was going on, but give credit to Don Mancini, he's always kept Chucky mostly in the spotlight. You had the original 3 movies, you had a pretty long break, and then you had Bride of Chucky, um, again, decent break, Seed of Chucky, decent break, Curse of Chucky, but man, I mean, did the move to TV work for Chucky? I mean, I haven't watched the Chucky show, but people seem to like the show. I know it got canceled recently, but I mean, that may be a product of just the TV landscape in general. It seems hard for a show to get past 3 seasons these days. Um, Chucky looks like probably can still return back to movies, but, having one person behind the entire franchise creatively has allowed them to bring back characters from the past, tie certain knots together, have one ongoing continuity. So and then you have, Chucky himself, the character of Chucky, uh, Brad Dourif, the voice, I mean, iconic voice. Just like you automatically know Ghostface's voice, you know Chucky's voice. Um, it's hard for the Chucky costume to get as big as the Ghostface costume did or Art the Clown did, because obviously Chucky's a doll, but the original Child's Play could have been a one and done terrible movie. The fact that it spawned such a franchise, 37 years, TV shows, tons of movies. Chucky is an absolute icon, and he belongs up there on that Mount Rushmore right now. Although I would say him and Ghostface are neck and neck for this 4 and 5 spot. I mean, when it's all said and done, it wouldn't surprise me if Ghostface is on that Mount Rushmore and, takes over Chucky, but to me, they're neck and neck with that 4 and 5. It all comes up to personal preference. Our top 3, it's no surprise who's in our top 3. The ranking of my top 3 might surprise people, but come on now, if you're a horror movie fan, these next 3 names, it's gonna be hard for anybody to move into the top 3. It's just gonna be hard. I mean, horror is as big as it ever was, but horror is big today, not necessarily because of horror icons. It's more because of I don't know, maybe the style of horror movies almost puts more of a spotlight on the director and the story and the atmosphere. It's really not about the horror icons, like a specific horror killer, the way it was back in the 80s when you had really the slasher boom was the 80s. So in the 80s, these guys really left a huge imprint on culture. And the way horror movies are today, where increasingly it's more about the quality of the script and, horror movies really are making pains to get good performance out of the actors and the creativity of the story. It's just less of a spotlight on the actual horror villain himself. Sans, of course, Terrifier, where Art the Clown is still your main dude. But so the direction of that makes it hard to see anybody really taking over. Like it's kind of like way back then, you had, of course, Frankenstein and The Mummy, and you had that original thing. But I think these 3 have sort of solidified maybe permanent spots on Mount Rushmore. So the preface of the 3, look, I'm just gonna give my top 3 preference here, ranking wise. Number 3 for me is Jason. Now, I wanna say this right now, of the last 3 horror icons, the Friday 13th series is the most fun franchise. If you did a straight marathon of these 3 franchises, in terms of pure fun factor, pure cheese heaven, pure watch with a crowd of people and have fun, you really can't beat the Friday 13th series. We got everything here. We got a guy facing off against a, telekinetic woman. We have Jason going on a boat, going to Manhattan, going to space, going to hell. We have so many variations of Jason. You get almost everything in the Friday 13th series. Jason himself, I mean, once he donned the hockey mask, it was off for the races in terms of being an icon. Everybody associates the hockey mask with Jason, maybe as much as the damn sport of hockey. That classic machete, that killer sound effect, of course, that Jason always has. Um, Not much can be said that hasn't already been said. The only thing we can say about Jason is his relevance in today's culture has been a little bit lessened because they just haven't made a movie in a long time. I mean, 2009 was the last appearance of Jason in the movie, 15 years. So he hasn't gotten the renaissance with the young people that some of the other franchises have. The other franchises are pumping out movies, making money, and here is Jason just sort of frozen in time. The 2009 remake was solid, but how long can you keep him in the cultural zeitgeist without a movie? They tried to do a TV show recently, but that's been put on hold as well. So we just need more of Jason for him to potentially even move up on this list. Um, Number 2 is going to be now this is gonna surprise people because I just said that about Jason. So you'd think my number 2 would be a pretty easy pick about who's most culturally relevant. But I gotta put Michael Myers at number 2. Now this is gonna be sacrilegious because we've all seen my Halloween videos. I'm obviously a huge fan of the Halloween franchise. I love Michael Myers, but he's not my first love, and the thing with Michael Myers is I think he's benefited greatly from having better management, and all I mean by that is that no, I mean, this is gonna sound silly because of the 3 top franchises here, the Halloween franchise has the worst continuity. It has the most timelines. It's all over the place. So what do I mean by the best management? I just mean that in modern times, the Halloween franchise has gotten the renaissance the other ones haven't. When they brought back Jamie Lee Curtis for Halloween 2018, it became, at that time, pretty much box office wise, now this is not adjusted for inflation, but box office wise, without inflation, the biggest slasher movie of all time, box office wise, Halloween 2018. Yeah, it's in my opinion, they fumbled the bag with Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. Not the biggest fan of those sequels. But culturally speaking, the new Halloween trilogy restored Michael Myers back to prominence because it had been a long time since a true Michael Myers movie. I don't even consider the Rob Zombie movies to be true Halloween movies. It was somewhat reliant on the star power of Jamie Lee Curtis to bring him back to prominence. But listen, Michael Myers is the OG. What can be said? I mean, in terms of a horror icon, it all starts with 1978's Halloween. Michael Myers, the masked killer, going after babysitters. There's no Jason. Most of these slasher icons, the idea of a slasher icon, might not be here without Michael Myers. Um, Black Christmas, I think, probably deserves more credit as the OG slasher. But Black Christmas is not doing any sequels. The character Billy didn't really take off as a horror villain. So I gotta, and again, you could also say Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but Halloween seemed to be the thing that created the slasher boom. So I gotta give more credit to Michael Myers than even Leatherface. Um, are all the movies good? No. Is Michael Myers all over the place in terms of his look, his mask? Is it consistent? No, but Michael Myers being the personification of evil just really stands out all time. And some of that I have to give credit to Dr. Loomis, who always was his hype man, always hyped up Michael. I have to give credit to Jamie Lee Curtis for coming back to the franchise, reinvigorating a couple times, keeping in the pop culture forefront. So listen, I'm a huge Halloween fan. Michael Myers is my number 2. I'm curious to see where they go with the franchise next for sure. Okay, so that leaves a clear number 1 personal preference. My first love for horror was Freddy Krueger. Um, Freddy Krueger, let me start with the most recent stuff. Of course, we haven't seen a Nightmare on Elm Street movie since 2010's terrible remake. A remake so bad. What's her face? Maria Maroney. What's her face? Is that her name? The actress from the movie almost quit Hollywood because of how bad her experience was on the set. The movie itself, it looks like the purpose of the movie is to put us to sleep. I feel like I took a sleeping pill when watching that movie. One of the most boring horror movies. Can't say enough bad things about Nightmare on Elm Street. Prior to that, we had Freddy vs. Jason 2003. Why is Freddy so iconic? Well, if you go back to the 80s when slasher movies were in the boom period, um, it's easy to have revisionist history about this, but I want everybody to understand. Freddy was much bigger in the 80s than Jason or Michael. You can go back and look at the box office of the movies. Those Nightmare movies were much bigger than Jason and Michael Myers in the 80s. Halloween, Friday 13th were lesser budgeted movies that made profit, but they weren't the hit movies that Nightmare was, Nightmare 3, Nightmare 4, even Freddy's Dead in 91, which people hate. Freddy's Dead made a good amount of money. Freddy was everywhere in the 80s. He was on MTV. He was in music videos. He was hosting hotlines. He had his own TV show, Freddy's Nightmares. Freddy Krueger was a cultural force in the 1980s. I think George Bush, made the president of the United States, had made a Nightmare on Elm Street reference in one of his speeches. You just can't get bigger than peak Freddy in the 80s in terms of being a horror icon. And a lot of that has to do with something that Jason doesn't have, and Michael doesn't have, and Ghostface doesn't have. And that's one actor, Robert Englund, infusing the character with amazingly memorable dialogue, voice acting, mannerisms, physical movements. I mean, Robert Englund is Freddy. One of the reasons it's so hard to continue the franchise is because we can't get past Robert Englund as Freddy. We can't move on beyond that because he made the role his in a way that few actors ever make a character theirs. Um, so I know. So I mean, of course, I understand that Nightmare on Elm Street, outside of an episode of The Goldbergs, Freddy really hasn't been prominent recently in recent years. But I think his impact, his peak was so hot that I think that that's what makes Freddy the most iconic horror villain. I think that his spot on Mount Rushmore can never be taken. I also think he's a little bit unique. I think Michael and Jason have some similarities. Not that they cancel each other out, but you could lose one of them because they have enough similarities, but you can't really lose Freddy because Freddy is the one that talks. Freddy is the one that has the personality. Freddy's also pretty sadistic as well. I mean, so got to give him a little bit of the same personification evil that Michael has. Freddy has that too. Jason, maybe poor sympathetic soul, misunderstood. Whatever Freddy versus Jason wanted to tell you. I don't know. But Freddy's my number one. He'll stay my number one. Even if they don't make any more Nightmare movies, I'm still going to have Freddy up there. But anyways, okay, that's the list. That's the top 10. Let me know if you agree or disagree with the list. Who do you have in your top 3, your top 5, your top 10? And I'm going to make a separate list for some of the B movie villains, as you'll see in the thumbnail. There's a lot of horror villains out there. Some of them don't get talked about. Got to put more respect on Serial Mom's name. I did put the stepfather in my honorable mentions. Anyways, until next time, you guys take care.